want to thank you all for attending, welcome you to joining us today for this webinar on the work, last couple of years actually, of our climate priority team. I'm Kevin Kephart. I'm the Deputy Director for the Institute of Bioenergy, Climate and Environment at NIFA. But I'll point out that people that are involved in climate change research, our climate priority team, they encompass all parts of NIFA. So this is a whole of agency effort that we'll hear about today. A lot of this stems back to 2021 as part of the Executive Order 14008 that the President issued in late January of 2021. And within that executive order, all government agencies, not just those in USDA, but throughout government, were required to develop climate adaptation plans. NIFA got to work on that right away through our team, who you'll be learning about today and getting to know a little bit on that. And part of our approach to developing a climate adaptation plan was to reach out to you folks, our participants in our funding opportunities, our grant programs, our partners and our partner institutions. And we did have some input opportunities for you at that time, including a webinar. I think that was in January of 2022. We also did some surveys of our employees within USDA as well to get their input into developing a plan. NIFA developed and had approved and published a climate priority and resilience plan that was put to work in 2022. Now, we've been having to report on progress and accomplishments associated with that plan for the last couple of years. And having done that recently for 2023, getting into 2024, we did observe that we've really had a lot of accomplishments, made a lot of progress toward that adaptation plan. And that's why we're here today, is to present some of those results, let you know what's been moving forward, what we've gotten done, and seek your input as well and your guidance on moving forward with that. So we've actually been making adjustments to some of our competitive programs that we offer to you. And we put new efforts into place, such as environmental justice and other things like that. So we're actually keeping tabs and taking account for what we've been able to accomplish in the last couple of years, and that's why we're here today. So with that, I want to hand it off to Erin O'Reilly, and Erin, you'll be leading this to kind of handle the logistics of our webinar today. With that, thank you very much. Thanks for your time, and I hope you enjoy this webinar.
Thanks, Kevin. Like you said, I'm Erin. I work in the plant systems division. And next slide. Okay, so in accordance with federal civil rights laws and the USDA's civil rights regulations, the USDA, its agencies, offices, and employees and institutions participating in programs prohibit discriminating based on race, color, national origin, religion, sex, gender identity, including gender expression, sexual orientation, disability, age, marital status, family parental status, income derived from public assistance programs, political beliefs, or reprisal or retaliation for prior civil rights activity in any program or activity conducted or funded by the USDA. This slide contains contact information for individuals who, with disabilities, accommodations. This also has contact information in that middle and last blurb, the last paragraph. For anyone who is wishing to file a complaint, they can utilize the phone number, the fax number, or the postal mailing address listed on this slide. Just a reminder, the USDA is an equal opportunity provider, employer, and lender. Next slide, please. So today's meeting is being recorded. The recording will be uploaded and shared with you if you wish. If you're having issues with Zoom currently, you can call the number on the screen and option 2, and Zoom support should be able to help you out. During the webinar, please use the Zoom Q&A box for questions or comments. At the end of the webinar, you can provide feedback orally. Please keep it short so everybody has a chance to talk if they wish. Please keep your comments, questions, or your introduction short, just so we can hear from everybody. If you wish, written feedback can also be provided and will be accepted through the end of May. Emailed to me, Erin O'Reilly at theusda.gov. Next slide. So with today's webinar, we'll start with a presentation on NIFA's Climate Change Priority Team accomplishments. And then we'll also discuss gaps and future priorities. And then after that, we will be having a Q&A and accepting and talking about feedback until about 4:15. Next slide. The NIFA Climate Change Accomplishments and Action Agenda report is the ultimate goal, what we're trying to do here. We are trying to document the team's accomplishments, engage and focus our NIFA Climate Change Priority Team, as well as inform stakeholders. This is a project that has been ongoing for a couple of months now. We started back in April. We've had a series of meetings and workshops internally. So it started with an accomplishments report presentation back in April. We did a gap analysis a couple of weeks ago, and then prioritizing our actions moving forward. And then today you are here for our public webinar and input. And hopefully later this summer, we will launch public accomplishments as well as this action agenda report. So next slide. And now I will pass it off to Megan, and she'll go through the rest of the webinar.
Thank you, Erin. I'm Dr. Megan O'Rourke. I'm the National Science Liaison for Climate Change at NIFA. I lead our NIFA Climate Change Priority Team and have been leading the efforts on this accomplishments and action agenda reporting. I'll walk you through a next series of slides about our team and our work on this and what we've accomplished in the last few years. So as Dr. Hephart mentioned in the beginning, our team came together right after the new administration in January 2021. And so the NIFA Climate Change Priority Team is focused on implementing executive orders and the administration priorities. So in January 2021, there was the Executive Order 14008, tackling the climate crisis at home and abroad. And then over years, we've also adopted other executive orders and considerations into our team. So for example, in April 2023, we also have Executive Order 14096, revitalizing our nation's commitment to environmental justice for all. Our Climate Change Priorities Team is one of 4 teams at NIFA. We also have the Nutrition Security Team, the Workforce Development Team, and the Market Opportunities Team. And integrated throughout all that we do in these teams are considerations of diversity, equity, inclusion, and accessibility. And these teams are organized to really break down the silos that can happen in an organization. So we have membership from all the different institutes and all the different divisions working together for climate change solutions. And this is an illustrative example of our team. So we have over 60 members. They are membership throughout all the major program areas, but also the operations side of NIFA. So we have membership from our Grants and Financial Management Office, from the Office of the Director, from Policy, and also the Office of Communications. And our first order of business as a team was to create the Climate Change Adaptation and Resilience Plan. We first identified our vulnerabilities to climate change. They included water quality and quantity, agroecosystem productivity and sustainability, food and nutrition security, resilience to extreme and variable weather, our education pipeline and continuity of operations. And throughout our consideration of all these variabilities, we think about how, in particular, they're affecting underserved communities and how underserved communities can be a part of the solution to climate change. And so the final adaptation plan was published in May of 2022. We identified 44 specific actions that we can take to address climate change. And we bin these actions into 4 categories about our NIFA programming, our organizational effectiveness, our strategic planning, and our outreach to stakeholders. We put a lot of effort into our NIFA programming related to climate change, of course, because that is core to our mission here at NIFA. We have had a fairly budget constrained environment such that we haven't been able to create any major new initiatives for climate change. But what we have been able to do is to rearrange our AFRI budget in order to create some new opportunities. And so I'm going to walk you through here on this slide are what new opportunities have we brought together over the last few years during this administration. So within AFRI, we have created the Extension, Education, and USDA Climate Hubs Partnership Program that's intended to link cooperative extension with the USDA Climate Hubs. And we've been able to make 15 awards for about $21.5 million. Oh, excuse me. We've also created the Rapid Response to Extreme Weather Events program that is intended to rapidly deploy extension and research following an extreme weather event. We've been able to make 25 awards for approximately $7 million. We have also created the Environmental Justice Program, which we made 1 award last year in 2023 for $1 million to understand environmental justice in communities affected by climate change. We also have within AFRI our flagship Sustainable Agricultural Systems program. So these are large projects up to $10 million each. They're integrated across research, education, and extension, and they're transdisciplinary programs that are intended to create real societal changes and impacts. And so within the Sustainable Ag System program during this administration, we've had an area of focus for climate change. And each year we've made a number of awards related to climate change, but because of the integrated and transdisciplinary nature, pretty much all of the programs within SAS touch upon climate change in one degree or another. And then this past year, we actually had a specific SAS call for enteric methane reduction projects. And so we made 2 awards for $5 million each. We've also been working with our partner funding agencies to fund awards. So with the National Science Foundation, we have funded projects within the program called Signals in the Soil. And that program is for creating sensors to more easily detect and measure soil properties. We've made 10 awards for $10 million. We also have funded artificial intelligence institutes in collaboration with the National Science Foundation. NIFA has funded 5 of those institutes, and one of them most recently is specifically focused on climate change, and it's a large award for $20 million over 5 years. We have funded 1 award through the NSF Convergence Accelerator Program, intended to provide nutrition security in the face of climate change. And that's a $5 million award. Currently, our opportunities that are available, we are working with the Department of Energy. So within our current SAS RFA, we have a program area for the Regional Resource Hub Partnerships for Bioenergy. So awards in this area would have access to the resources of the DOE Regional Resource Hubs. And those projects would be intended to have low carbon bioenergy and bioproduct development. And then we are also funding with NSF the Future Proofing Plants to Climate Change program. And that is intended to promote international collaborations between researchers in the UK, the US, and Germany for plant breeding. Now, we did have the good fortune to have an influx of funding through the Inflation Reduction Act last year for $250 million for a new education program that we called Next Gen. It is intended to provide our minority serving institution partners with money for scholarships and fellowships and internships and job placement in order to train the next generation of workers for our food and farming system. From that program, we made 8 awards related to climate change for approximately $57.5 million. And on the international front, I have mentioned some of the work that we've done that also relates to our international efforts. So our 2 SASS methane projects are aligned with our US pledge towards the Global Methane Pledge, which aims to get countries to reduce greenhouse gas emissions, or methane specifically, 30% by the year 2030. And it also supports our international work on the Aim for Climate initiative to raise the international investments in agricultural research and development. And then, of course, the NSF Future Proofing Plans to Climate Change is specifically promoting collaborations between the UK, US, and German researchers. So that covers sort of the new work that we were able to do in climate change over the last few years, but we also have worked really hard as a team to integrate climate change throughout all of our existing programs. So this is a table of our AFRI programs that now have climate change language. And so we've worked with the national program leaders who administer all these programs to talk and really try to seamlessly integrate climate change within these traditional program areas that we have. This is also a table that shows our competitive programs outside of AFRI, in which we've also worked to incorporate climate change. And so you can see this is a long list. We've worked really extensively on our programming to integrate climate change throughout our portfolio. So what I want to do here is walk us through our expenditures for climate change programming. We have data just from FY 2022 that we'll share here today. We are still working through the methods of how to best extract climate change related projects from our database of thousands and thousands of projects. So we're going to present the competitive funding here. We also have capacity funding. So about half of NIFA's budget is competitive funding and half of it is capacity or formula funding. And we know that the formula funding is also being used for some work on climate change related research, education, and extension. However, the way that the capacity funds are reported makes it really difficult to tease out how much money is spent on different activities. So again, this is our FY 22 money. In our competitive funds, we had about $1.5 billion overall. And we've done 2 analyses here. What we did was we took a very conservative approach and we searched for just the projects that included climate change in the title. And then we did a more inclusive search with a very inclusive keyword search of all our projects. And then we manually culled through and sorted through which projects seem related to climate change or not. And so it's a range, very conservative and an inclusive range. And so if we just look at projects where climate change is in the title, we see that about 3% of our competitive funding includes that. If we take our more inclusive approach to analyzing our data, we see that an additional approximately 10% of our projects are related to climate change. And then if you assign those to different topical areas, we separated the projects into clean energy projects, into climate change adaptation projects, and into projects that we have designated as US GCRP or US Global Change Research Program. Now, those projects are ones that you would think of as probably more traditional basic climate science research. So those are projects related to measuring, monitoring, reporting, and verification, or greenhouse gas modeling in agricultural systems. And so we see that a small portion of our budget, just 1%, is spent on the sort of traditional basic climate science research. We have a larger percentage, $82 million approximately, for clean energy, and a similar amount, $89 million, for climate change adaptation projects in agricultural systems. if you break that funding down between research, education, and extension, we find that more than half of the expenditures are for research, 57%, and we have roughly a similar amount being spent for education and extension related activities to climate change. So about $40 million each for education and extension in FY22. And we wanted to take a special look at our MSI serving programs compared to our overall competitive program portfolio. So these data on the right for our MSI serving institutions, this is a sum of 13 different programs. Of course, MSI institutions, minority serving institutions can apply for all of our programs, but these are the data just for the programs specifically serving our 1994s, our 1890s, our Hispanic serving institutions. And so if you break down these data, we have about $9 million within our MSI portfolio being spent on climate change related activities. And compared to our overall competitive portfolio, we have slightly more being spent on education and less on research. So similar amounts in our MSI programs for extension, a little bit more for education compared to overall, and a little less for research than overall. And then if you break down the funding in specific different program areas, again, across all our competitive portfolio, we have 187 million being spent on climate change related projects. So that's about 12% of our overall competitive programming budget. More than half of that is coming through AFRI. So we have 26% of the AFRI budget being related to climate change. Our Small Business Innovation and Research Program, we have about 20% of that program, or $5 million on climate related work. In the Organic Transitions Program, we have a very high percentage, over half being spent on climate change related stuff, but because that's a smaller program area, that's only $4 million. Our Organic Research and Extension Initiative is about 20% at $5 million approximately. Our Specialty Crops Research Initiative, about 15% of that is spent on climate change related work, for $11 million. And like we just showed, the minority serving institution budget's about $9 million is spent on climate change related activities, which is 8% of the total. And our SARE data program is a little bit different. So SARE is in a separate database than the rest of our projects. And so these data are very low, but that is because this is just climate in the title projects. So in that very conservative approach to data analysis, where climate is in the title of projects, 3% of SARE projects have that. We would expect if it extrapolates similar to these other data, that might be up to closer to 12% if we were to do a more inclusive data analysis. Okay, so that's a lot of stats and data. We want to give a little bit of a flavor of types of things that we're funding. You can use your phone and scan the QR code here. And we want to share a little bit about these 3 projects that we think are really exciting. We have the Climate AI Institute funded through the University of Minnesota. Its full name is Artificial Intelligence Institute for Climate Land Interactions, Mitigation, Adaptation, Trade-offs, and Economy. It's out of the University of Minnesota, but they have many collaborating institutions around the United States. And we expect that this project will have really important impacts on greenhouse gas accounting in agricultural systems, with implications for climate smart commodities and carbon markets. Our second project here in the middle is funded through the Sustainable Agricultural Systems Program. It is a $10 million program through Colby College in Maine. It's entitled Coast to Cows to Consumer: Marine Algae Use to Enhance Milk Production, Mitigate Greenhouse Gas Emissions, and Recover Nutrients. And this project aims to reduce greenhouse gas emissions from the dairy industry while developing opportunities to scale algae production as a feed additive and revitalize rural coastal communities. And then finally, this project on the right is really focused on education. It is through Oregon State University, through our AFRI Youth Innovators Empowering Agriculture Across America's coordinating network. And a major focus of the project is developing a youth climate curriculum that emphasizes climate smart agriculture and forestry and is culturally responsive and focused on Pacific Islander and Indigenous youth. So that has kind of wrapped up. We've spent a long time on our programming because that is obviously a focus of our mission, but we also want to briefly share some of our work on our organizational effectiveness. So we have worked very hard on our climate adapted granting procedures. So we created with the Rapid Response Program, typically, if you're familiar with our programs, you apply once a year, but that obviously isn't rapid in response. And so we've created granting procedures so that as soon as possible after a climate disaster, that applications can come in and be reviewed for the Rapid Response Program. We also have moved almost entirely to a remote workforce here at NIFA so that if there is a climate disaster, people across the country won't all be simultaneously affected. And meanwhile, we have our IT cloud system with fail-safe backups to protect our data. We've also been working internally on climate education at NIFA for our team. And so we created this climate priority team. Each month we have invited guest lectures from our awardees or people working in the policy space to keep us up to date with the cutting edge climate change science and news. We also, as a team, participated in creating USDA's Climate Change 101 year-long seminar series. So we participated in creating that seminar series, and we also, many of our NIFA Climate Change members attended that seminar series, and for that we won the USDA Secretary Honors Award. We created a climate corner in our staff newsletter where we update each other on what's going on in the policy world of climate change, and we have created climate change talking points and slide decks. So anybody at NIFA who's giving a public presentation can easily incorporate information about climate change into their presentation. And we have really invested in staffing up NIFA with people with climate change expertise. So since this new administration, we created the Climate Change Division. We've hired our division director, who we will hear from shortly. We have hosted an environmental justice fellow within NIFA. We currently are hosting 2 climate change fellows. And then we have recently hired within the animal systems division a national program leader with expertise and background in climate change, and also another national program leader in environmental systems who similarly has a deep background in climate change. And in terms of strategic planning, NIFA and the climate change team has really worked hard to integrate with the rest of the USDA and the federal government to support the administration's climate change priorities. So we're very active in USDA teams who work on climate change. We have a monthly Global Change Task Force team where people from USDA from every agency meet and collaborate together. We participate in the agriculture, forest, and climate science bi-weekly meetings within USDA. There's recently been formed a USDA strategic science strategy implementation team. We participate in agricultural greenhouse gas inventory implementation team. So that is to implement the Inflation Reduction Act $300 million investment in a national greenhouse gas inventory. We participate in the Global Research Alliance and AIM4 Climate Task Force within USDA. We also support the U.S. Global Change Research Program strategy. U.S. Global Change Research Program was formed by Congress in 1990 to coordinate interagency efforts across the federal government for climate change research and development. And there are many interagency working groups that we participate in to support that overall work. We're also part of interagency teams. We work with DOE, Department of Energy, on an agrivoltaics team, with DOE also on a sustainable aviation fuels team, and with Department of Treasury on a climate financial risk team. And we have supported many government reports and strategies. We have contributed our expertise and our time to the IPCC synthesis report that came out last year. We provided authorship for the 5th National Climate Assessment, also reports available online: Building a Resilient Biomass Supply, Our Changing Planet, the Environmental Justice Scorecard, the Impact of Climate Change on American Household Finances, and the various USDA strategic plans. We provide support for program reviews for different agencies within USDA and different departments. We reviewed the USDA Climate Hubs, the US Geological Surveys, Climate Adaptation Science Centers, and NASA's Harvest program. And we have provided expert reviewers for the USDA Climate Smart Commodity Partnership Program and the National Resource Conservation Services Conservation Innovation Grants Program. And finally, the fourth main area that we've been working on is stakeholder outreach and communication, to be in touch and have a mode of communication. We have a series of webinars that are available online. We have 3 webinars about NIFA climate change funding across different specific programs that you can access. We have a series of webinars about transdisciplinary science, we have this past year published a webinar where we worked with the nutrition security team to talk about the intersections of nutrition security and climate change security. And then previously, when we were developing this adaptation plan, there are some recorded webinars about the history and development of the NIFA Climate Adaptation Resilience Plan. We have been working with our partner organizations at universities to develop a national climate change roadmap. This got published in late last year. You can use this QR code to access it. And for that effort, 61 leading scientists were consulted from 51 institutions, and they identified core themes and principles for tackling climate change in food and agriculture. And the follow-on effort to that is that the Cooperative Extension is working towards a National Climate Action Plan for Extension. Now, we realized that it's one thing to spend money on all these efforts, is another thing to track the impacts and to report on those. And so we have been working on developing our impact reporting procedures. We have a SAS program evaluation award who is the awardee is helping us to evaluate impacts of our SAS programs. Our Environmental Justice Award, it is focused on designing novel approaches to map the benefits of investments in underserved communities, so helping us to understand how best to articulate the impacts of funding in underserved communities. And then over the last couple of years, we have 11 NIFA climate change blogs and impact articles available online. And we have recently created, within our climate change team, we have an amazing liaison from our communications office who work with us. We have created an internal database at USDA that documents all our stakeholder engagement so that we can see what each other are doing and coordinate across the agency. And we are working on a list of stakeholders and liaisons to our stakeholders for climate change. And with that, I now would like to hand this over to Dr. Rachel Melnick, our division director, who will talk about our cross-cutting work and lead us into the Q&A session of our program here.
Great, thank you. So as Megan, Dr. O'Rourke said, that I am Dr. Rachel Melnick. I am our division director for our division of global climate change. And I'm briefly going to go over some related initiatives that are related to climate change, but perhaps are managed by some of our different teams within NIFA. So one is environmental justice. NIFA has had a long-term interest within environmental justice, but is also trying to be responsive to Executive Order 14096, which was signed by President Biden in April 23, sorry. And this is following up on previous executive orders on environmental justice. What's unique about this executive order is it sets a formal definition for environmental justice for federal agencies. And really what this executive order did was deepen the whole government commitment to addressing environmental justice. So what has NIFA done to be responsive to this executive order as well as the others? Prior to this, to be responsive to this executive order, NIFA expanded what we had as the Justice 40 Task Force to become the Environmental Justice Task Force. And this is allowing different staff across the agency, not just program staff, but grants management and our EEO group, with a wide range of groups to ensure that we are being responsive to this administrative priority across our programs. I do want to point out that NIFA has already been funding work on environmental justice through a range of our competitive and capacity programs, so addressing environmental justice is not new to the agency. Prior to the executive order, NIFA created an AFRI foundational program on environmental justice, program area priority A1461, and just made one award to North Carolina A&T University to help develop methods to assess how our grant programs impact communities with environmental justice concerns. In response to the executive order, NIFA has modified this program area priority, which was set up to be a pilot, to expand it through partnership with our Institute of Food Safety and Nutrition to advance understanding of environmental and climate justice impact metrics in food and agricultural systems. This program is currently open, and at least one project will focus on advancing youth voice in environmental justice in relation to nutrition security and human health. I do want to note that our agency is reporting on environmental justice through help of the Environmental Justice Task Force, both through our work on J40, as well as through the Environmental Justice Scorecard. And we hope to have a webinar very specifically dedicated to that work in late summer. And we would remind everyone to keep an eye out on our events page for such notifications. Next slide, please. So this was very difficult for me to focus on because we have done a lot of engagements, both through the climate priority team, through our work with J40, Justice 40, as well as through our work with environmental justice to engage minority serving institutions. So while I have a list here, I want to highlight that this is not a comprehensive list. This is just some recent highlights of activities that NIFA has addressed to really look at the intersection of climate as well as some of our other priorities across the agency. So one partnership that's going on is partnering with our sister agency, Agricultural Research Service, to host grant writing workshops. Right now, we had just hosted one a week and a half ago at South Carolina State University, and there is an intent to host 4 a year at the 1890s, 1994s, and an HSI. There is one upcoming at an HSI in Texas in a few weeks. So while we are hosting that at certain institutions, we are encouraging participation from anyone who is able to make it to that institution or within the local region. So last week, another area that's really looking at the intersection of climate and how we can impact and work with MSIs is there's a group of representatives from 5 different granting agencies who presented opportunities for climate funding to tribal colleges and universities during NIFA's monthly tribal programming call. I was one of the representatives there. This started as an interagency group where we were just like, hey, we're all working. We all looking at the intersection of climate for our tribal colleges and universities. How about we work together to collaborate for these opportunities? So we had a few calls and initially started out having this webinar, and we are just received an email earlier today. We're going to start looking at next steps and how we can better collaborate and share our information with tribal colleges and universities. So really looking forward to more work in that space. And thanks to Erin Riley and our tribal college program and the rest of the staff there who has really been working to make sure that it's NSF, NASA, Department of Energy, USDA, and other interested agencies and departments get involved and interacting to each other. Another area that NIFA has is we have standardized language for tribal ecological knowledge that can be incorporated into our RFAs so that programs can encourage projects that incorporate tribal ecological knowledge into their research, extension, and education. One such example is the AFRI Foundational Program, has the Extension and Education Climate Hub Partnership, has some language, but that's just one of several programs that include this language. Another area to highlight is over a year ago, the 1890s came together to form an integrated multi-state project on climate change that is addressing soil health, water, environmental justice, as well as policy and how they can inform policy. This includes all 19 of the 1890 universities, and NIFA has briefed and gotten to attend their annual meeting, and they are really doing some excellent work. And that's actually an example that's coming from our community, just to be responsive to our administrative priorities. So again, I just want to highlight that this is just a few of the examples. We have projects from the insular areas, our Hispanic Serving Institution, our next gen projects that all have a focus on climate change. However, we know we have more work moving forward, and we really would like to ensure that we have a great engagement and can help with technical assistance and access to our programs, and that we're communicating well as an agency to all of these different institutions. Next slide, please. So Megan, am I taking the gaps analysis, or is this going to go over to another staff?
I'm happy to take it back.
Okay, so I will turn it back over to Dr. O'Rourke to go ahead and really talk about all the excellent work that has been going on.
Thank you, Rachel. And so we've laid out for you what our accomplishments have been. Our next step in this process is to look at where the gaps are and where do we want to prioritize moving forward. And so our climate change fellow, Dr. Marissa Weiss, has completed a gaps analysis. We started by looking at our climate adaptation resilience plan. If you have ever had a chance to look at it, it has a great table at the very end that lays out all the actions and metrics that we can take. And so we've been reporting on that for the last couple of years, and we can see the gaps in that. So we identified gaps from there. We compared that also with various strategic plans from the NIFA strategic plan, the USDA science and research strategy, the USDA climate strategic plan, the USDA overall strategic plan, as well as our climate change roadmap. And we've brought those gaps and priorities back to our NIFA climate change priority team. We've been talking about them over the past month, and the two areas that rise to the surface that we have, budget to do right now is to figure out better how to invest and to express the impacts of our climate change investments. So how do we go from stats and numbers to more the storytelling and putting a face and connecting all the way from the investments to how does it affect the economy and people and livelihoods and such. And we also need to support that through our portfolio analysis. So we showed data from FY22, and it's actually quite a challenge to determine what is a climate change project and what is not. We have thousands of projects to go through and review. And so we are working on that process, as well as creating an internal climate change dashboard that we can use internally to quickly sort projects for not just climate change, but different specific topical areas within climate change, whether it be, say, carbon sequestration or methane mitigation. And where we see this all, this work that we're doing turning into an accomplishments report. our main goals is to be very transparent about what we're doing with climate change and also to create a report that is very useful to our stakeholders. So we envision a narrative section going over the areas that we've outlined here today. And we're thinking about various appendices that can be action-oriented and quick reference sections. So a list of, what are how do we come up with our climate change accounting and detailed methodologies so that it's very clear how we are counting climate change projects or not. A list of projects that we have funded in our specific climate change priority areas. A list of links to resources, whether it be the webinars or blogs or impact articles, and then clearly mapping our work back to the original climate change adaptation plan, the matrix, so that it's one-to-one. We plan to do this, and here's a report on what we have accomplished and what are still outstanding opportunities. And so with that, I'm going to hand it back to Rachel because we're going to transition into our Q&A and feedback. So Dr. Melton will be helping to facilitate that portion of the presentation.
Well, great. I will ask all of our panelists for the Q&A and the feedback section to go ahead and join us. And since I'm the facilitator and I can answer the first two questions in the Q&A box because they're related, I will go ahead and do that. As a reminder, if you would like to provide feedback or ask a question, you can either put it into the Q&A box that is at the bottom of the screen, or feel free to raise your hand and we will unmute you to let you go ahead and provide feedback or ask a question live. So I will go ahead and combine the two questions. So we have one question on which programs fund the U.S. Global Change Research related funding? And then also somewhat related to that, going forward, is there a plan for more funding related to basic climate change, including basic climate change science with an emphasis of land, agriculture, forestry processes? For those of you who are not familiar, U.S. Global Change Research Program is an interagency research program that USDA NIFA is a member of. As part of that, we actually report the budget that is related to more of that basic climate science, measuring, monitoring, reporting, and verification, and that sort of related science. So there is actually several programs that fund US GCRP related research. There is not one program that would fund it. There are projects within AFRI. There are projects within our capacity, such as our Hatch programs, as well as projects within like the 1890 capacity building program that would track to US Global Change Research related research. So that is reported, and we can actually, we know which programs tend to fund research in that area. In terms of plans for more funding, NIFA works with what we are appropriated, but we do like to take any feedback of such as this on areas of science you think that might be gaps or that we might need to address. So would anyone else in the panel like to follow up on our basic climate science? Okay, so there's a question here about whether we have a list of the upcoming ARS NIFA grants writing workshops. I will try to find that and go ahead and put that in there. If you would like to find any of the NIFA technical assistance, you could go ahead and look up our events page and we list the technical assistance there as well. Erin, do we have anyone who would like to come off mute?
We do. We have one. So I'll go ahead and allow them to talk. Go ahead. Bird, apologies if I mispronounced that. You do need to come off of mute though. I've allowed you to talk, but you do need to go ahead and unmute yourself.
Oh, I didn't have a question actually, but since you called on me, I'll ask a question, which is, how does the University of Minnesota Modeling Award relate it, if at all, to Colorado State and Comet and all of that.
I can answer that one. And Ferd, would you like to briefly introduce yourself?
Sure. Ferd Hefner, policy consultant to wide range of organizations working at the intersection of climate and agriculture.
Yeah, so the University of Minnesota project for AI climate change, that was just awarded last year. So it has a sub-award with Colorado State for working on the COMET model. So we anticipate, and we are actually helping to make the connection with other groups within USDA who are working on the COMET model to make sure that they are all coordinated. But yeah, so definitely their work will feed into supporting the basic modeling of that. And we hope that that will then improve kind of the service delivery for the Climate Smart Commodity Partnership Program, as well as ultimately have some significant implications for work in carbon markets and such.
Great, thank you.
Okay, so there is a question here about tribal areas needing tremendous assistance with climate change, and has NIFA thought of collaborating with tribal nations, tribal governments to tackle climate change programs? So NIFA actually hosts a monthly meeting with the through our tribal colleges and universities program. That is not just tribal colleges and universities, as well as our staff has actually gone out to different tribal nations to see what their needs are. So it is something we are very aware of, and part of the reason we are developing that interagency group of staff across the US government who are looking at tribal colleges and universities, and our programming reaches that is a one way that we are doing that. So we are definitely looking and very aware of the needs of the tribal nations at addressing climate change, and trying to encourage our grantees. We actually have quite a few projects, such as there is an extension hub project, as well as several SAS projects that are addressing that need and working directly with tribes to address their needs to become more resilient to climate change. So I have another, go
I was
ahead.
gonna say, we do have another question from the audience,
Sure.
whatever. So we'll have David.
Yes, can you hear me?
Mhm.
Yeah, this is David Kay, Chair of the National Extension Climate Initiative. I wonder if you could elaborate a little more. Very early in the presentation, you talked about NIFA's agency-wide priority team approach, climate change, nutrition security, workforce development, market opportunities with DIA kind of threading through them all. Could you talk a little more about how these actually different areas relate to the climate change work, the other areas, in a little more detail? So I'm personally particularly interested in the workforce development part the most, but I'm interested in all of them to some extent. So
Yeah, absolutely. So, so that we don't become siloed in a new way amongst these teams, we meet quarterly as interagency teams. And so we are talking about what are opportunities, what are needs in the different teams, what are ways to collaborate. I would say we've probably had the strongest collaboration so far with our nutrition security team and the efforts at the White House on nutrition security. With market opportunities and with all of the teams. So, for example, we are more or less ad hoc meeting and talking and seeing what we can do. And so with the workforce development, for example, that's when the next gen thing came down the pike. That's when we started talking right away. How can we work our RFA and develop the RFA in a way that integrates not just kind of traditional workforce development, but workforce development for what purpose? And so we put in language about for creating a climate smart adapted workforce.
I will just follow up and say that the staff who are working on the different priority teams all are well connected and work together to make sure that we're looking at the intersections. I personally am the climate priority team's liaison to the nutrition security webinar, nutrition security priority team. We hosted a webinar in January jointly, and we are really trying to make sure that we're not just working in silos, but looking at the intersection between the differing priorities. Okay, we have another question in here. It says, as you noted, NIFA has worked to better integrate climate change under all AFRI programs and all AFRI non-competitive programs in coordination with the national program leaders. Can you share any specifics on how climate change has been incorporated in program administration, RFAs, or otherwise prioritized?
Excuse me. I was going to say I can take this one, and so we've kind of had a multi-year process with the team, and in 2021, we had this large mandate to integrate climate change throughout our portfolio. We have our funding cycles in which we modify RFAs and get those approved throughout the USDA chain of command. And so over a series of years, we tackled, here's a set that we're going to work on this year, and next year we started tackling the AFRI programs first. And so basically what that looked like was really talking to the national program leader who was in charge and having conversations. In some cases, a national program leader would have been very familiar with climate change science and how that integrates with their program. In some cases, that was a conversation, and we drafted things back and forth. I think we've found in basically every opportunity where we've looked to integrate climate change that there is some intersectionality. Some programs have more of an obvious intersection than others, but there's been a very cooperative approach, and every year we've tackled more and more of the program areas, such that you look at our portfolio now, I think more or less in almost every program you will see verbiage. And we're just really trying to make it clear to our applicants that there are intersections. Think of these novel intersections. It is a major, just a major thing that we need to tackle, and it integrates in all ways throughout our climate change science.
So we've received a few questions about measuring effects or impacts of our projects. One was what is NIFA's approach to evaluating the impact of our climate related awards? And related to that, sorry, I have to scroll back down, is how are you measuring the effects of older and new programs have on climate change? We've heard about funding going out and projects underway, but how has this created any positive change on the climate? Is there a separate report to show efficacy of our programs? So overall, how are we measuring impacts of our programs?
I can take a stab at this, which is to say that this process is really under development. I think that we have done a good job at reporting kind of the stats and figures that we showed. Even there, this topic of climate change is tricky because, for example, is a project related to a pest that could be more of an issue under climate change? Is that a direct climate change report project? Should we count that? Should we not? So there are issues even with the accounting of our awards. That is the front end, right? That's how much money is being spent. That's not the so what question. And so that is really one of the priorities that we've tackled now. So one of the things that we've done is that we've made some awards to institutions to help us figure that out. We have an award for a SAS program evaluation. We have our environmental justice program also to help us understand how our investments affect underserved communities. And then internally, we're also trying to look back at our long-term portfolio back from when NIFA was formed, over a decade ago, and look at those large expenditures. We see different themes that have emerged, and we see how it affects the economy. And so we've been talking about the process. How do we go back to our PIs? How do we document this? How do we see effects on companies being formed, jobs being created, different sectors of the economy changing? So we see this as an important priority, but it is a work in progress that we are focusing on in the near future.
We have two related questions. One I'm happy to ask and then drop links to the programs in there because they're ones managed by my team related to extension. It looks like the climate funding is going to research and education. We're wondering how you plan to enhance more extension and outreach effort on climate change and actions. I will happily take that and also relate it to extension. Will there be a focus moving towards helping extension assist communities to develop resilience plans and strategies? So NIFA actually has two programs that are focused on extension and climate change. Both are in the AFRI Foundational RFA. One is the A1712 Rapid Response to Extreme Weather Events program that is looking at extension and outreach efforts immediately following an extreme weather event. There was a question earlier in the chat box about agricultural drought that gets included, as well as a wide range of other extreme events. So these can either be integrated or extension-led projects. The other one is the extension and education partnership with the Climate Hubs, which is in the AFRI Foundational Program. It's A1721. And that again can be extension-led projects to address climate change in partnership with our Climate Hubs, as well as integrated. So we have two programs that are out there and ready to go to help fund that. We also know, looking at the plans of work from extension, that there's a lot of work going on in the communities, and we do recognize that as well.
And I'll add kind of broader context in terms of our programming. You know, we had historic investments in climate smart work throughout the economy through the Inflation Reduction Act. NIFA did not receive a large part of that money. We did receive some money for the Next Generation Education program. But if you look at other agencies, so EPA has tens of billions of dollars for climate smart community programming, and other parts of USDA also, like the Natural Resources Conservation Service and the Regional Climate Partnership Program. That has a lot of money also for organizations to implement climate smart practices. So we are on the research and development and education pipeline side of things. We didn't get a lot of new funding, but there are other parts of the government that you can look to for that support.
So here is some really excellent feedback that we received in the Q&A. One, it states, I am a current NIFA postdoc and my project addresses climate resilience. I know it is challenging to identify the climate-focused projects, but has there been any thought to convene climate-focused project directors together, similar to how NPLs gather project directors annually? I would say we haven't thought to have a project director meeting at this point in time that's focused on theme versus program. But I think moving forward in some programs, such as like the AFRI SAS program, which we have just recently hosted a project director meeting, we are considering sending some of those project directors maybe every other year to a relevant project director meeting that isn't just SAS, but is related to their area of work. So I think that is an interesting idea to maybe host project director meetings or outreach on a theme versus maybe a specific program, and be able to work together to do that. Does anyone else have any insight? So I have a question that Dr. O'Rourke might want to take. Are there any plans to prioritize agroecological projects as a climate resilient approach to food systems?
Well, I think Dr. Melnick passed that one to me because my PhD would be considered in agricultural ecology. And so we absolutely consider that approach relevant to climate change. We have a specific foundational program in sustainable agricultural, the agroecosystems management program within our foundational AFRI area. But in terms of evaluating its fit to climate change, we wouldn't necessarily say that every agroecology project is a climate change project, but we absolutely understand that relationship of an agroecological approach. So answer is sort of yes.
Great. We have a question here about the regional rural development centers and their relation to climate work, and what role they do play. So does anyone have any insights or thoughts on that? I will say there's a strong connection with our rapid response program because the staff that lead the Regional Rural Development Center program, as well as the Eden Extension Disaster Education Network program, also work with our rapid response program. So I think there's an excellent internal collaboration where we have the staff working on all those programs working together. So I'm happy to follow up and connect you to the staff who are working there. There are some climate related and aspects of the work the regional rural development centers are doing. And I think that the work they're doing is very important. Personally, one of the programs I always find very interesting, but if you want very specific examples, we are happy to follow up with you on that.
And I will say they conducted a survey a couple of years ago about regional interests and needs and concerns related to climate change. So they were did that assessment across the different parts of the country in terms of where are people concerns and where are university resource gaps and concerns about climate change. So that information was provided by the regional rural developers.
So we have a question here in the Q&A that says greenhouse gas or carbon removal technologies and strategies, as well as related MMRV, is a hot topic that pertains to USDA NIFA climate priorities. How can NIFA's participation and funding in this sector expand in the near future, potentially supplementing current RDD&D and other agencies such as the Department of Energy?
Well, I'll take a first stab, and Rachel, you may want to follow up. So, as we've said, we are in a budget constrained world. We don't have a lot of new programming. So what we lean into is our collaboration with other organizations. So, for example, the $300 million investment in a national greenhouse gas inventory that is being led through the Natural Resources Conservation Service agency within USDA. And we participate in those teams to give feedback about how can, for example, universities participate in that data analysis and compilation and be part of that process. And so we absolutely see that as a very important part of what's going on in the climate change world, and is necessary to have that information and data. But we have to, at this point, mostly rely on other agencies and collaborate with them as possible, as opposed to originate the funding from NIFA itself.
Yeah, I will say that NIFA has been involved in terms of the fact that we are on the working groups for the IRA MMRV work, so we're aware of the work. However, the work is funding internal science and standing up networks, which makes sense that it would stick with our sister agencies. So we're aware of it. In terms of supplementing Department of Energy funding, it's a bit of a challenge just due to scale. Department of Energy in certain areas receives quite a bit more funding than NIFA does. So we are working with what we are able to, and most of our interagency collaborations we're able to fund through our AFRI programs, but not some of our other programs. Definitely we are well aware of some of the research gaps and some of the needs, and looking at the potential of collaborations, or whether being able to just communicate with other agencies, or the potential to maybe fund something in the future. So I have a question from Dr. Alton Thompson and it is, what does NIFA see as the next phase for the National Climate Change Roadmap?
you want to start with that one, Rachel?
Absolutely. So we already have had some next phases going on for the National Climate Change Roadmap. The first being that the extension community, the proposal was led by the Extension Foundation, came in and put a proposal to host a climate convening associated around extension that was hosted in January of 2023 as a NIFA conference grant, and several of our staff attended that to help that community go ahead and worked together to develop a plan to address climate change. We think and we see that as being an excellent way for other communities to work together. We hear interest in a wide range, whether it is through the land grants or other entities, where there's a lot of great interest in the National Climate Change Roadmap. And we are really starting to see other entities working together and forming teams to work together in collaborations to see the next phase of that. I think that the question of what the next phase will be is really dependent on the different communities that are coming together and embracing the work and what they see as the next steps and how they would like to address the roadmap.
And Rachel, we are pretty much out of time. We have outstanding questions, but we also want to encourage everybody, if you have any comments, feedback, things that you would like to consider in response to our presentation, please submit those, that information to Erin O'Reilly at USDA. So we're going to be looking at that over the next couple of weeks as we create our final climate adaptation accomplishments and action agenda report. We encourage you also, please always feel free to reach out to national program leaders for programs that you are associated with your questions. We are here to answer your questions and to work with you and to encourage the work that you do. And so I want to thank our team as we've been working diligently on this for the last couple of months, and also thank the folks here who've been able to tune in for this entire webinar and to again, please encourage you to follow up with Erin. And if you have questions for us, you can email me at Megan O'Rourke, any of these questions that were outstanding here. But thank you so much for your time today. Appreciate it.